Welcome to this space today, and thank you very much for coming out at maybe a little bit of a strange time on a Saturday afternoon. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on this space, that this land is the Katimomoi, Waitaha and Kaitahu, and that we've got this beautiful gallery where we've got this wonderful exhibition, Memory in Mind, and I welcome our panellists this afternoon. Introductions. Jenny Rock, in the middle here, waving. Jenny Rock holds a Bachelor in Arts in Human Ecology, has a PhD in Biological Sciences, has completed postgraduate work in Visual Arts. Although Portobello-based, she is currently a Research Fellow with the University of Otago and also University Centre for the West Fjords and some unpronounceable Icelandic name in Iceland, and College of the Atlantic, Maine, USA. Bridie Lonie is an emeritus member of the Otago Polytechnic and former head of school of the Dunedin School of Art. She was a founding member of the Wellington Women's Gallery in 1980. She has a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Painting, Masters in Art History, and in 2018 completed her PhD, Closer Relations, Art, Climate Change, Interdisciplinarity, and the Anthropocene. Jessie James Pickery. Jessie has a BVA from the Dunedin School of Art and a postgraduate diploma in Science Communication from the University of Otago. Jessie has just returned from a trip abroad on the research vessel Joides in transit from Naples to Aotearoa, which is a geological survey focusing on the intersection of Indigenous knowledge and Western science. Prior to that, he was the Senior Māori Engagement Advisor at GNS Science and Māori Engagement Advisor to the Prime Minister's Office during the COVID pandemic. Louise Beer. Last wave. Louise is an artist and curator. She holds a Master's in Art and Science from the Central St Martin's and a BA Honours in Fine Art from Middlesex University, London. Through her artworks, Louise explores humanity's evolving understanding of the Earth's environments and the cosmos. And we're very fortunate to have Louise here. She's only just arrived from the UK, so she's a wee bit jet-lagged. It's 3 a.m. in her brain. And she's going to be working with Ian Griffiths on a British Council Connections Through Culture project. And she's also been a past participant in this art and science project with an amazing work she made for us in 2022.
I originally am from this wonderful city, and growing up in Aotearoa, I also spent a lot of time in really beautiful parts of central Otago as well. And so my environment was very different when I moved over to the UK. When I was growing up in Aotearoa, I didn't realise that the enduring presence of the dark and quiet skies of New Zealand is not something that everybody around the world experiences. So to quote Megan Eaves, who recently wrote in a publication about dark skies, "The Milky Way is now invisible to a third of humanity, including most of Europe and North America, but in New Zealand it is still visible from 96.5% of the landmass. Almost everywhere in the country is a 30-minute drive from a dark sky place, including the centre of the largest city, Auckland." And this is really central to my artistic practice, the experience of living under the enduring presence of the night, as I said, here in Aotearoa, and then moving over to the much more light-polluted skies of the UK. So through my artistic and curatorial practice, I see my life experience divided into two parts, light and dark. Light being the first half, living under the dark skies of Aotearoa and being able to see the Earth as a planetary landscape. And the second, under heavily light-polluted skies in towns and cities in the UK, where a cosmic relationship is much harder to grasp. So without both of these experiences of skyscape, I might not have ever understood how important I think it is. So my interest in light pollution has many different layers, but I'm really interested in the philosophical effect of living under dark skies or under light-polluted skies. And in my practice, I use installation, moving image, writing, photography, sound, and participatory projects to tell the story of our changing relationship to the night sky and our precious planet. Recently, I contributed a chapter called The Transparency of Night, which talks about these themes into this amazing book called Dark Skies, Places, Practices and Communities. And the book is by a collection of about 15 different types of professional artists and scientists who are looking at the effects of light pollution from very different angles. And it's available free online if anybody would like to read it. I'll just read my chapter abstract out so you can know what I wrote about. So, as light pollution increases around the world, humanity is losing a symbolic connection to the cosmos, shared by our ancestors throughout history. I examine how living under the dark skies of Aotearoa has influenced my artistic and curatorial practice, and how my artwork can invite the audience to explore their own changing relationship with the night. Through the discussion of 5 artistic projects, this chapter explores how living under dark skies or light-polluted skies can change our perception of grief, the climate crisis, and Earth's deep time history and future. Each of the projects has started with a fundamental connection to the night sky and reflects my changing relationship or understanding of life, death, darkness, and light. I'm just going to talk a little bit, very briefly, about a couple of different ways that I engage with scientists as an artist. So the first one is a recent exhibition that I was commissioned by an organisation called Firmin Woods, Contemporary Art, and they're based in the sort of Midlands in the UK. And myself and my partner and collaborator created this installation in this incredible 16th century church called Of Immeasurable Consequence. And so the artwork is continuing on this theme about trying to help people understand or be open to seeing the absolute incredible nature of life on Earth, not through statistics or data, as I do in my practice. I mean, I don't do that in my practice so much, lots of other people do, but through emotion. So in this installation, there were 2 really large-scale photographic images taken under a full moon of the forest where we were in residence. And on the reverse of these images were actually photographs of the Milky Way taken at Mount John Observatory in Takapo. And there were sculptural elements, as you can see here, and also a sound piece made using field recordings from different creatures around the world. The scientific element came from our own personal research, but we also had an event with an astronomer from Cambridge University who did an event with a telescope at the private view, and through the clouds we tried to see the moon and Jupiter and its moons, which was really wonderful because a lot of people haven't ever looked through a telescope. And we also had a really fascinating talk by the scientist called Paul Fellows, and he spoke about volcanoes in the solar system, which was absolutely fascinating because it really underlined the sort of precarious nature of a habitable planet. And it provided another layer of contextualization, again, through sort of sharing and opening up an idea for the audience rather than telling them straight out what they should be thinking. So a couple of years ago, thanks to Pam McKinley, I did a collaboration with scientist Jeff Wyville, who is from this wonderful city. And the project that I did with Jeff was called Revolving Through the Megacosm. And through conversations with Jeff, we talked about the different tides in the atmosphere as well as the tides on Earth. And because I'm really interested in the atmosphere and its transparency, this was a really interesting idea to me. So I explored lots of different things about our atmosphere, but also I was looking at how the atmosphere was created and how it enables life on Earth to exist, and also how it travels around the solar system with us. So this incredible transparent barrier between life and the cold vacuum of space has only travelled around the Milky Way with us 18.5 times in Earth's history. So it's something that we probably don't think about that much, but when you take it apart, it is a really, obviously, incredible, has an incredible story in itself. So within my artistic and curatorial practice, I'm also the director of 3 different collectives in the UK, Pale Blue Dot Collective, Lumen and Super Collider. Lumen is a art collective based around the sort of exploring the idea of astronomy and light and ecology. And we co-founded Lumen with my colleagues about 11 years ago, and we used to have a gallery in the crypt of a church in London for 7 years, where we continuously curated exhibitions about astronomy to bring a different type of perspective by having it within a church, which was completely non-confrontational to anybody. It was just about trying to examine and explore how we understand life on Earth. And Super Collider is another project that I am a director of and have been for about 10 years, I think. And with Super Collider, we've curated about 100 events with scientists and artists. And through this panel discussion, I really thought about it, and it is quite like science communication. But we also curate exhibitions that have artwork alongside sort of the most interesting parts of science. And there's quite a few online, if anybody would like to see them. And Pale Blue Dot Collective, I run with my partner, John Hooper, and we engage with scientists and go on different residencies as well. So one last slide. The reason I am here in this amazing city that I have thought about so much for the last 20 years is because I was funded by the British Council Connections Through Culture grant to work with Dr Ian Griffin, who is you probably all know, but he's the head of Te Hura Otago Museum, and he's also an astronomer. And he lived in Kent, where I am living now in the UK, and used to, anyway, we've kind of like swapped places, and it's really interesting. And so I'm going to be working with Ian and different astronomers based in Dunedin, as well as geologists and biologists, to create a project called Earth, a Cosmic Spectacle. And I'll be having an exhibition at the beautiful Science Gallery, which I think opens on the 17th of August, but I have to check. And I don't want to say too much about it, but it is an exhibition that incorporates my particular type of layered photographic imagery, hopefully sound, and also the words and thoughts of these different scientists. And we're going to be thinking about the climate crisis through the very long and slow development of Earth, and also the long and slow development of the universe. So I hope you can all come and see it, and I hope it sparks some conversations and different ideas. So thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you, Louise. So Louise, in fact, has given us a wonderful case study of an art science approach. And the three of us, Jenny, myself, and Jessie James, in that order, are going to kind of perhaps more look at the ways in which art science can be understood. And so I'm now going to pass over to Dr. Jenny Rock, who has published extensively on this subject matter, plus made many works.
Kia ora. More from a Q&A kind of perspective did I come today. So I don't have any nice visuals for you other than some inadvertent scrap paper, but use your imagination and I can share websites and things with you afterwards. But so I started out doing a lot more biological research than art and poetry, but they were always happening side by side. And for sure, lots of my scientific practice fed into my arts practice. It was inspiring, it was driving me, I was immersed in it. But over time, I realized that, in fact, my arts practice was informing my science. And so I have got examples of that, which I can talk about later, and that I've written about. But things evolved, and in that process, I became very taken with the commonalities of the practice of doing art and the practice of doing science. And I saw lots of commonalities and got quite fixated on them and saw science communication as a way to delve into the philosophy aspect of that, but also the practical aspect of that. And so through science communication and spending time with you as well.
Yes,
Well, I had a lot of fun finding ways that arts practice could help communicate science and engage us with science and get us really conceptually and emotively more in tune with it. And so through that, I started really realizing how much I didn't know about social science and the reasons between us and what we see as other, and how culture and politics and horrible economic stuff, et cetera, drives a lot of the position that we find ourselves in, and drives a lot of the dichotomies that we make that I personally see as problematic between art and science. So all that was happening, and then I realized that I was really actually getting really interested in not only commonalities in practice, but participatory practice. So how we're all participating as individuals or as communities in the art of understanding the world through science and art together as common practices. And so that, in the last few years, has got me really working in the space of community social arts practice. And so how do we use the practice of doing art or being creative to help us solve problems within the community? And so I'll give you 3 examples of that. So I'll just say them now. So it's merging social science and art. And so for me, this is a practice of what I will call art science. And I think we'll get into a discussion of this later about how that might be different from sci art or environmental art or things like that. But for me, it comes down to practice and research. And that's what art science is. It's a form of science that's using arts practice. But when I say research, it's not necessarily me doing research on a community or someone else. Research, as I see it, is something that emerges from all of us as a collective. So a community can do research on itself, right? We understand things about why we know something and how we know something and how that might inform what we can do in the future. So that's the kind of research that I'm talking about. And so I've used arts practice for a form of community consultation. So you probably you've got your own ideas about what a consultative process is, but it uses a lot of traditional social science methods. And so I was trying to use something different, and I have a partner in crime here as well in the audience too. And so we've been working with communities to make a different form of consultation. I'll give you an example of that in a minute, but the aim here is to widen who's being consulted and how they're saying things, and thus what they're saying. And so for better representation and more inclusion. But then the second thing is using arts practice to actually empower communities. So as sort of a form of facilitation to help them in decision-making around tough issues that all communities are facing now in this world. And sort of building from that is a third way, and that's how to use arts practice to actually help communities become more resilient. So, and by resilient, I mean adaptive, being able to change, but stay themselves, so being continuous in the future. So those three things. And so for an example, and this was my inadvertent visual, it's not much to take out of it other than it's a poster, but it was from a consultation process that the Dunedin City Council did a couple of years ago as part of their community, what was it called, Jessie? It's when they were talking to St. Kilda and St. Clair about coastal adaptation. So it was part of their plan. Yeah, the coastal plan. And so what I and others did was make a series of workshops that used social art processes to help people explore, well, what do I really value in that coastal area, really widely, from cultural aspects to biological aspects to you name it, and what am I afraid of losing? And so that information that resolved itself by how people visually express themselves fed into the DCC plan. And in fact, they won an award for it later on in Australasia because of their wide view. So that's an example of that. But an example of using social art to help a community identify what are my active values now, what are my heritage values, but how does this inform my decision making? So an example of that was lots of communities now, but in fact, this was 10 years ago, are dealing with the way that we're trying to make Aotearoa predator-free by 2050, or some time in a more feasible future, is through a lot of quite contentious issues, really, when it comes down to what you want to see in your community, whether it's whether we can have cats or not, or whether it's what kind of poisons do we use, or whether it's do we have big predator-proof fences in your face. They're all tough decisions. And so Rakiura, Stewart Island, was one of the first communities to have this in their face more than 10 years ago now, and it's still ongoing, a discussion and a decision-making process. So we used social art to help them think about what are the most important values and what are the risks and what are the pluses and minuses of all these really quite full-on predator removal devices. We also brought the same kind of social art workshops to the peninsula and to the port communities. And then most recently, right now, we've got a project going with, it's a Center for Research Excellence at the university, but it's called Coastal People, Southern Skies. And so it's helping communities think about how do we adapt and change because of climate change and all of the associated evils. And so it's about resilience, it's about adaptation, it's about change, but it's about also maintaining really deep heritage values. And so part of that means identifying, well, what do we still carry as heritage values? And what of those values feed into our current identity? And what of those values are going to be really important for us to carry with us in the future under this big change that we're facing, that we'll all face in different ways or are facing. And so there we're using social arts practice again to help communities express what they see as their heritage values, specifically coastal related. Again, we went to Rakiura as one of the starting places. We're down there last year. And using that art expression as a way for communities to start nutting out those tricky questions of, okay, this is what I value, but I see that I'm going to lose this. And I see that maybe I have to change this value in order to regrow in my new situation that the environment or the economy or whatever is imposing on me or us as a community. And so that's the kind of stuff that I've been using art with, and specifically using printmaking in a lot of these instances for a lot of good reasons I can get into later. But definitely different people come to these consultations and reflection points. It's definitely using art's process as a thinking tool because it slows things down, right? Like you can't answer a question visually anywhere near as fast as you can answer it orally or writing it down. So it makes you think about what you really think, and it helps you express it in a way that's less. It's not just prescriptive, but text and oral responses privilege things, because what you say first or what you say last, we just automatically, I don't know why, we put emphasis on it. It's what we remember, so we put dominance on it. But if you have a visual, a whole bunch of images all together, there's no prescriptive way to enter a visual, right? You can't prioritize one part of it over the other, right? So it means you have a more inclusive representation of what's important. And I think that helps you get at the complexity of how do you express what's important given heritage, given current constraints, given what you see for the future. It's it's one big mess, but I think it becomes a really beautiful, interesting mess when it's visualized. And so I think that's a really powerful way to use art.
Kia ora. Thank you, Jenny. Jenny's already said quite a lot of things that I agree with, one way or another, but I'm going to come into it perhaps more through the art framework. But I think I might start by saying I'm just currently reading Ian Gilchrist's The Master and the Emissary and Eugenia Cheng's books on abstraction. And just to pick up one thing about the dialogue between the written word and the visual image, Ian Gilchrist talks about the kind of two sides of the brain, one side being focused on abstraction and the other side being focused on context, to be brutally reductive. But the context that he speaks of includes emotion and situatedness and the whole sensorium, and the abstraction he speaks of is not, as an abstract painter of mine was enraged by the implication of abstraction, but in fact was quite wrong, because his abstraction is in fact removed from context, removed from materiality. It's the abstraction of the kind of algebraic mind, if you like, or the 1 + 1. It's that very, very simple, clear-minded. It's right. By what principles can this thing be right? And that sense of rightness is something that art doesn't quite go to. So, in lots of ways, the point about scientific stuff being classified as the stuff that people are right about means that a whole lot of other people are terrified that they will be wrong about it, and so they go running. They run miles and miles and miles from science. It's Eugenia Cheng talks about art and science as a false dichotomy, and I truly think they are. Coming from a family of 3 parents who wrote poetry and were scientists, I've never found that a helpful distinction, but there are distinctions that kind of matter. I think so. There is another thing about art, though. One of my historical experiments was to do a master's. Any study I've always done has been in order to answer a question. And that always also was at odds with the idea of art. Absolutely not interested in expressing myself, right? I mean, you wouldn't think that, would you? But I think or necessarily in making things beautiful, although these things happen by the side of things, really. But with art, one engages in this whole body located, sensorial, situated experience. My master's was actually about art therapy, and one of the questions that I found that was fascinating in the study of psychoanalytic art therapy and all that kind of stuff was some advice that somebody gave to people who are thinking of taking the creative arts for therapeutic purposes. And the first and most useful piece of advice was, if you have learnt how to be an artist, then I'm sorry, it's not going to work as a therapy. The reason, of course, is that in comes quality control. No good. Therapeutic work, therefore self is no good, right? It really, the issue of quality control is very difficult. The issue of quality control is one of the issues that the art world can take when it doesn't like the art-science approach, because the art-science approach isn't going to prioritise an aesthetic order over information and relationship, right? And so, and I, one of my constant fascinations is, what do people think about art? I've always thought it's a great litmus test, because the point about art is that people's values are entirely located. They assume that art is there to express their values. At the art gallery, in one of my roles as president of the Dunedin Public Art Gallery Society, I was sometimes discovered that observed the rage that people expressed when the art gallery was not expressing their values, and the sense of entitlement. This art gallery is for me, and it is showing stuff that I think is crap. And rather than disagreeing with them on a quality control, that struck me as being a really significant understanding or indicator of what art meant to them. And so another important sociological attribute about the use of art in art science is that it intrinsically, people bring their values, their emotions, their feelings, and their sense of locatedness and experience to the data or information that the science is negotiating. And I think just one more point I want to make, which came in discussions about Pam's book, this amazing book, with my partner, who's a physics teacher, but he's also a Buddhist. So he can believe 6 impossible things before breakfast every morning, as far as I'm concerned. But he said this morning, Pam's a technologist. She loves techne. It's the making and it's the thinking that is going on, and the relationship that is so common in these art science projects. And that you can see when, Louise puts we can see the two sides of the two ways in which we see light or no light, but we see it through a making that has sufficiently mimicked the operations that you are seeing, in the sky, to be a plausible entry into that idea. And technology is the working operational pattern of the artist. The artist does not think an idea and it arrives straight down there on the plate. The artist works through. For example, if we look at the sad yellow bean plants that are going to fade, their life is going to cease to exist. They're going to cease to exist even on the printed plate that Catherine Allard has made, the drawn plate, because the inks have got the attributes of a weak plant, the yellow ones. The black ones are fine. You'll be all right. You'll have them, it's not all bad news. So the artwork is kind of engaged in a process that has sufficient connections with the science to be able to be understood from both ends. And in the middle, where you locate it, where you embed yourself, when knowledge is embedded in all of its parts. And, Damasio, lots of people say, basically a rat is not going to be interested in doing a trick to find a piece of something or other if its emotions aren't engaged first. So emotion is important. but it's an access point. I think that's where I'm going to stop, although I was going to read, and I commend you to Pam's book because she describes the details of finding the access points and the imagery that will connect this kind of knowledge. And she also makes sure that consultation with mana whenua occurs, which is a very necessary and emotionally much more necessary than we acknowledge context. Plus, the scientists have their way, and the kind of technology will do something that it couldn't have done if it wasn't doing this project. So it's not simply replication. Okay? Now I'm going to hand over to Jessie. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know. Shall I talk loud? Is this loud enough?
I'm sorry.
I feel so obtuse. Cool, ka pai, kia ora koutou. Jessie tēnei, hiuri tēnei no ngā pui me Ngāti Whātua. Hello, first off, thank you for coming. Pleasure to be in the company of these fine rangatira, chiefs, in their own rights and respects. I've shared knowledge and drank from the pools of learning from these two. And they cross, yes, but they have very particular areas that they spend time in. And my piece is not really so constructed. I'm just going to reference things that I've heard and try and share my point of view, I suppose. The big bits I've caught are this idea of like a polemic or a dichotomy between art and science, right? And one, for me, the way that I can kind of express my understanding is, for the past 6 years, I've been in the field of these two colliding creatures, and that's been mātauranga and science. So it seems much the same in its dissonance. They are two, I see them in my head in pictures, right? So think of a spider web, and these are tools for a purpose, and the function of science, as I understand it, is a means by which we expand our agency into the world and maybe decrease suffering ideally, or increase our agency, or I don't know, it's a means by which we achieve things. And even if that's just breaking down the gross quanta, it's so that we feel a sense of understanding, control, enablement, whatever. Kei a koe te mana, right? You find what you like in it, provided the tool functions, ka pai. And it's Western science, and I know that's not quite a nice word for a lot of people that partake. It is an external kind of process. So like it seems like you point outside of yourself, and you try not to cloud it with the person or all of this chaotic stuff, you know? And the power that comes with this is you've disembodied the science, and you're no longer confined to this, including the knowledge I have will pass with me in my body. But when you get it outside of your person and frame it in a way that the lenses can actually collide well, so that instead of misknowing or miscommunication or malformation, whatever you want to call it, instead of that existing between us, we have a shared plane to approach each other on. And it gives us a ground. And we connect on the ground being the point of truth, not the person. And art in the inverse seems to be so the same. You're breaking down the quanta, you're understanding the world, you're finding meaning or developing meaning or ascribing things certain powers and potencies. But it's based on this internal world. It's the inner collision that kind of justifies your external experience. And I think these two can never quite marry because they're two separate things. Unless, like me, you like entertaining multiple things at once. Because I do believe nature's under no obligation to make sense to us, but that should not paralyze us from extending our knowledge and trying to see how we emerged from this place. So it is ours as well. In a sense, in that mātauranga sense, or the Māori vibe, it has a different sense of connection, and again, they're like a spider web. But these spider webs are not on the same plane, and they're oriented differently. Doesn't mean that they don't communicate, doesn't mean that they don't share meaning or translatable value. I think they're a spider web here and a spider web here. And if you're going to look at it, look at the place where they cross. Go to where they meet, because these are two planes intersecting, and that's where you'll find the beauty. And maybe science and art are like that. Maybe I have a rampaging curiosity, and I like people a lot. And I went and spent time in the arts, and I did so until it overwhelmed me. Because like Bridie mentioned, it was emotion is used as a penetrant. It's a means by which you get through people's sense of self or engage people. You get through them and you introduce something and it catalyzes or does something, right? Pushes you, pulls you, changes, flavors you, whatever. Ideally, art will do something. For me, anyway. And I see that as a utility, and a lot of people see it as a superfluous add-on or maybe just an aesthetic. I think that's mandatory. It just doesn't... I feel like it does two different jobs, but they meet in the same... They're trying to do the same thing, but in complete different ways. And I don't know if it's a...
Talk about the bracket stream.
Yeah, okay. We've been chatting a bit, and Bridie knows me well. She knows I'm a very boop, 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 tangential and whatever. So I'll respond very well. You'll get more value from me in a question setting, but hopefully there'll be something worth listening to here. So thinking of if, in this context, art could be the thing that is being used by science, right? Because it seems like it's a, from what I've heard anyway, it's a means by which science is achieving things that it is having a lessened ability to do over time, apparently, and whether it's a plurality of truth or a destabilization of a shared narrative, whatever. But if we look at it as that is our land, that is set our terrain, when we have science is the foundation of our knowing, right? Or at least explicitly. That's what we're told, we're taught things. It's thrown at us, these knowledges and knowings, and if you're dissonant without a base, you're not valid or welcome. So you must at least live on the landscape that science has formed for us to even encounter it or speak to it or challenge it, anything. So in that sense, then Mātauranga or the arts could be seen as a river laying on that landscape. And that's that caution of, cool, yes, you're incorporating a new asset and a feature, and cool, hei aha, where you force this river to go is what this river will be. And that river will be the thing that we look at and understand to be the waters of art. And you have, conscious or not, these are knowing systems that are laying on top of each other, and I question which should be the foundation. So should we decide it is the sciences as we've practiced for the past long time, and we'll say that being a Western reduction or materialism, should that be the base of knowing there are things that cannot exist on that landscape? You know, like we're not going to have kumara growing down here, except that Te Pao Te Wera because it's very clever in microclimate. But it's just the nature of spaces and the things that things can tolerate. And there's only certain space when it's already been defined. And if you're welcoming something in, it must walk to the space. Or does it? And I've seen things moving, so maybe the landscape is shifting, but I question who is the foundation of this shared thing? And how? Yeah. But I don't have an answer for that. I just find that a really interesting place to think in, you know. Hei aha, that's kia aku nei whakaaro at the moment, my little understanding. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora. Thank you, and of course that makes me think quite a lot about school syllabuses. Quite a lot.
I'll pass it through.
Now it's time for pato from you all. So do we have people who have questions that they would like to ask? I will bring the microphone to you, or repeat the question. Or comments, or do you want to take 2 minutes and wriggle? Hang out, hands up. Pam might have a... Oh, yeah, you do have a question. Kia ora, thank you. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amy Doherty and I'm currently teaching at art school. I was wondering, does there have to be a foundation?
Instant thought? I don't know. It's true, it's true. I hear, but how do we meet each other then? What plane is it that we can come to each other on and actually have resonance, not just dissonance? What, you know, like I don't know if it does need to be a thing, but I just know that we in this room are that plural and we're already a subsect of a subsect, right? And that's just like this whānau of toi and science. And if we in this room are that plural in our base understandings and base perspectives, what do we agree to meet on? How do we, you know? Yeah.
I don't know either. That's, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
It makes me think about, we could also talk about them as disciplines again, and so I like to think about the space of transdisciplinarity rather than multidisciplinarity. And so the multi would be that having those bases, those grounds, like, oh, this is my platform to speak from, and this is your platform, and maybe we have multiple platforms together that are overlaying or that are webbing together or something, but we still have these platforms. But when you come to transdisciplinarity, they're so interconnected. There is no platform, and I think it confuses the hell out of people, because again, it's a very hard thing to approach. When, how do you understand one thing when it's not this and it's not that and it's not this and it is this and it is that, and so sometimes it's just easy for our brains to understand things by having boundaries. But then maybe if we get to the point of being able to just establish and then dissolve, and maybe that's kind of what a web is. It's got little places of stability, but you'd never fully trust it to support yourself. And yeah, it's strong, but it's so utterly flexible. I don't know.
I don't think I've got anything to contribute to that. Thank you.
There's another one question here.
Thanks, Bridie. I was just going to respond to that and I guess ask a further question. To me, this idea of the foundation and wondering where the foundation is and how we establish that automatically makes us think as we do think in terms of hierarchies and structures, right? And it reduces it down to something that's almost overly concrete. And one of the things that I really loved about this project was the collaborative aspect, which is, of course, in everything you all are talking about, and the idea that what you achieve, what you gain in the collaborative process is that space between. So it's the very communication that becomes the thing that's most important, not necessarily whichever order you do it in. And I don't remember if it was you, I don't know who said it, the thing about when you're working in words. Oh, maybe it was you. I think it was you, yeah. That when you're working with words, you prioritize. We remember the first or the last, or we're given an order because that's how words work. And my whole world is in words because I'm a poet and an editor. And so that is so important to remember, because one of the things that we try to do if you're doing collaborative writing, it's also about that the open space, leaving that space open. And I guess I just wondered then, my question is, do you think that the space and the uncertainty and the unknowing is just as important as what we bring to it with our own knowledge, with our own aesthetic, with the things we're already coming into? It seems like this is a world of total uncertainty, and that's maybe the beauty and the importance of it. So I wondered if you would talk a little bit about the unknowing and the uncertainty in space.
Start with
I would just say that when I've worked with scientists, it's the space where we meet is something that neither of us could do on our own. And we're really adding to either their knowledge or way of thinking or mine or both at the same time. And lots of things, really amazing things come out of that. And I was going to say that I never kind of go out to intentionally work with scientists, but it is just the type of knowledge that I want to gain through my practice and through the project I'm doing or the piece of work that I'm making. And it is because scientific research completely feeds my imagination. And that's the reason that I'm an artist, rather than sort of communication, I guess. So there's nothing more exciting to me than talking to scientists about their research. So, yeah, that's what comes out of the meeting space for me.
I think you said it very well, so I'm not sure what more I could say. But about uncertainty, I think this also relates to the idea that to me the most important parts are the doing, it's the practice, which is of course the uncertain part because you don't know what the product is going to look like, what the output is going to be. So it's all about the practice, and it also makes me. I also wanted to say something to respond in a similar way to what Bridie had. I think we think about science and also quite possibly about art too much as end products. And I know we confuse science with technology and we think that all science is applied. And in many ways, what I hope we're getting to now in conversations like this is realizing that everything is a circle. This whole linear, we're progressing is I think complete rubbish. We're going back to sort of more Renaissance ways of thinking in terms of science being an art of knowing and not necessarily a specific methodology in terms of a technology, but more as again a practice of inquisition. And so if we let go these ideas of truths and laws, which really only applies to the physical sciences and then only in certain contexts. And if we let go of this idea that science has anything to do with an absolute truth, it isn't. It's about plausible solutions in the moment in a particular context that maybe get repeated enough to be a kind of supportive web, but still nothing you'd ever bet your life on, except for the very few tiny little laws that we possibly maintain from physics. But so if it's all about just an apt explanation or an apt interpretation of the world, then again, I think, it becomes completely temporary and it acknowledges that it's going to be in flux forever and that what we've got now works now. And again, I come back to this idea of we're just going to go around and come around again and again, like in circles. And I think happily we're coming back to a way of thinking now that sees science and art in similar contexts as Mataronga. And because old ways of knowing and doing are really appropriate now, much more than technological fixes. Yeah, that's probably more of a tangent. But.
Wow, love that. You speak because you know science very well, right? And you can explain it so well. And what I've experienced with direct outreach and engagement in the sciences is what scientists understand to be science is not what us as laymen do. So though it is a collection of things that may be disparate and held together by the same approval, whatever, that's not how it lands. It's no science knows. Science is God. It's that same false, So that's and these things where even the physical sciences, the fact that we have a stable set, but we don't. These are dynamic. We collapse them because the need of accuracy became far beyond the technical capabilities of 1972. And that's where we got our foundational constants. They're dynamic. We just chose to average them because it outweighed our capability, and we needed to make further. We had to further extrapolate and abstract our thought to gain greater knowledge. We did, but it came at a cost. We lost resolution and we accepted something to be static that is not and will never be. But without that, we would have never been able to gain so much knowledge. So it's a weird trade-off, yeah. Sorry.
So just to you, questions of knowing and not knowing, I think I want to say, perhaps expand what I meant about techne, which is that knowing something through creating a kind of model or an analogy which produces an artwork or a model or an experience or a kind of a weaving. When I was thinking about that issue earlier, I was thinking about the way Pam's weaving of scarves indicates the kind of fragmentation that is occurring to glaciers, for example. So the knowing and the not knowing, one can through analogy and experimentation and technical experimentation, actually come to know something much more in a much more embedded way, really, I think. A different kind of comment, one of the chapters in my thesis was about an exhibition in 2009, curated by Lucy Lippard, which was put together by conceptual artists, because Lucy Lippard at that point, the government in the United States had successfully politicized climate change, so that the Republicans said that it was just a furphy, and the Democrats went along with it. So it had moved completely out of the scientific domain. So verifiability seemed to Lucy Lippard to be, and the use of actual data in examples seemed to her to be the thing that you needed to do. The ethos of the Anthropocene, which has sort of come since that time, embraces complexity and unknowing, but also embraces technological and scientific knowledge, and it's much less of a disciplinary, the discipline wars are much less present in there because they all need one another. And not knowing is something that we really need to know. We don't know. And it's complexity that we don't know. Because for goodness sake, since 1850s, halfway through the 19th century, people have known about what carbon dioxide increase would do, but we didn't know about plastics. We didn't know about, there were all sorts of other things we didn't know. And now there are so many more things we don't know. So the ability to deal with what we don't know is a very large part of this whole kind of project. Sorry, and now you had a question.
Thank you. You may have answered part of my question, but I'm wondering what your role, all of you, is in political discourse. I can see you're trying to communicate with communities and with us here, but there's a whole lot of people in power that are ignoring science completely. And there's so many issues out there that need addressing. How do you think what is your role, and how do you think you can actually have some sway in decision making up there?
Well, I'm just going to answer that by saying that you're looking at the co-convener of the Dunedin Green branch and the Green Women's Network and the Green Party, and I just decided that I thought, well, I could go and put my body across a railway track, but I'm a little older and I didn't want to, although I have to commend the people who are older than I am, who are about to be charged for that. So I just thought, go and do some mahi in the political arena. That's my answer, really, because, and also these things, communication and embedding and so on, but my God, it's not easy. That's my answer. It's not an answer.
Kia ora. Tika, that's very true. I share that feeling entirely. My way to do it in kind of central government roles was the expediency of the response opened up a lot of space for things to be, for new solutions to emerging problems, right? And basically it was, you can't stop the bull, but you can pull a horn so it doesn't run a kid over, And that's my approach to that. Accept it for what it is. And these are mechanisms that are far bigger and beyond me as an individual, but I have my role to play because you're in there, right? So you have an obligation to do what you can with what you have, if you have it, I feel. And really it was just taking their policy. It was look at the fine print and then work in the words because you're not going to stop it, but at least you can hold them to account after. But in the very direct sense, that was my understanding of a role when you're close to great mechanisms. But otherwise, it is connection forming, I think, and also separating connections, because over the lack of plurality of certain systems of knowing, we've made things cement in the lieu of having a presence. And I don't know if all these connections should be there. And always, never take down a fence unless you know why it was built, like the classic. Do question every removal and addition, association and connection, because I see a lot of people using things that offer a sense of social status or a sense of worth that is an external additive, not an internal or intrinsic to the person. And that's not saying that that's always. I'm just saying that that's an emerging common feature of practice, is that people will attach to ideas of value that are ascribable. And I don't think there's any truth to that. I think it's going to cloud the waters. But I am also no one to say what is right or wrong there. But your connection and cutting ones that are inappropriate. People sharing knowledge, all this kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a hard one. I guess I was going to answer it personally and then professionally, but then I realized actually it's probably just one. Personally, I think the political systems around the world are so broken, and including in this country, and I don't see effects without catastrophe. So I tried working within the Sustainable Seas. So I tried within a national science challenge, so that's as high up as I've been able to sort of try to infiltrate, and I could say a few good things about that, but I think even that process failed and fell. And so personally, my only response is rebellion and resigning from things that I protest against, basically. But I'm responsible as well, and compulsively. I don't know. What did you say? You loved humans or something? You loved people. I like people. You liked people. Yeah. I'm on the other end of that scale, and yet I respect the community as the voice of the future, because I think we're going to get to that. Honestly, technology is not going to save us. Government's not going to save us. We're the only thing that's going to save ourselves.
I would say that there's lots of different types if I understand your question correctly, there's lots of different ways to be a climate activist, and there's lots of different roles within that sort of framework. And what I try and do and have done since I graduated from my master's in 2013 was to create events with lots and lots of people, so through exhibitions, but also popular science events, and through creating my own artwork that tries to share my sense of wonder for the world around us. And that has had a really intentional drive behind it to help people to understand what's at stake without making them feel guilty or scared. It's about really trying to create the a meaningful connection between the person and the world around them that they come from and are part of, and the universe around them that they come from and are part of, to try and basically secretly trick them into understanding how precious life on Earth is, and therefore hopefully they will make better environmental choices and also vote in a way that is the best for the environment. So that's my type of climate activism that is not directly engaging with local or national governments, but I understand that that's what I can do the best. And I think lots of things can come out of that when you have sort of inventive ways to do it, I guess, so always trying to reach people's emotions. That's what I've been trying to do for years. So, yeah.
I think it's time to drop professionalism and speak out. No, that's all.
It's suggesting we drop professionalism and speak out. So, okay. Do we have any more questions?
So before we close, I just want to I've been scribbling away and kind of just thinking about everything that everyone's been saying. I love the idea of stealth activism by art. So, and everybody's been speaking about different things. So the place we're born into is kind of determining who we are and how we see the world. And you've all been talking about relationships and relationship building, community building, but also relationships to the earth and our places around us, which are actually in turn shaping us in our immediate environment and also through deep time. And also thinking about the last comments, how we need to better concentrate on our understandings we have of ourselves and each other, not as the other. Our strengths and frailties, you talked about risks, the things we're going to lose, Jenny. We need to work together to achieve these greater understandings and appreciations and leave no one behind. So I'm going to close as we opened, because this is also our closing of our exhibition. Mā te rongo, ka mohio, mā te mohio, ka marama, mā te marama, ka mātou, mā te mātou, ka ora. And I think this kind of sums up what we've all been talking about. Through resonance comes cognizance, through cognizance comes understanding, through understanding comes knowledge, and through knowledge comes life and our well-being. So kia ora. Right, so thank you, Kamahi, thank you very much. Thank you so much to all our speakers today. Thank you for coming out, and I'd like to give everyone a warm round of applause and welcome.